Good evening, Crimson Tide Nation, and welcome to the lucky number 13th edition of the Alabama Crimson Tide Live Call-In Show from yours truly, Jackson Johnson, and my partner in crime, Jeffrey at Only Taught Sports, where he taught sports every single day, or at least he tries to. And let me tell you something, folks, it's been a wild ride for 2024. Now we got to get started on 2025. Wonder what's going to happen here and there. We want to recover from that ReliaQuest Bowl because let me tell you, it was a terrible day in Tampa. How you doing today, good buddy?
Happy New Year, Jackson, and Happy New Year to the Alabama Crimson Tide faithful out there. It was not a good New Year's Eve game. I'm not going to lie. I was very disappointed in Alabama's performance in that game. I basically told you and, told you guys in the chat as well when we did, our preview of that game that all Alabama had to do was just show up. That's all they had to do. If they show up, and they gave maximum effort like they did against Georgia and like they did against Missouri and LSU, they're going to win this game. Michigan has so many opt-outs. Michigan, they have no offense. And that rang true. Michigan had no offense in the game. No offense. They didn't do anything. The only reason Michigan won the game is because Alabama kept turning the ball over on their own side of the field. And it set Michigan up in good field position where they were able to kick field goals, and they did get the one touchdown. All of their scores occurred on drives that Alabama gave them the ball already in plus territory. And again, that's why they lost. That's how they lost against Oklahoma, because you're gifting them points. Instead of it being outright gifting with pick sixes like the Oklahoma game, it was just you put Michigan in really good in position to score because of the fact that, hey, like we're at the 35. All we got to do is move the ball 5 yards. Let's kick a field goal. And that's basically what Michigan did. Michigan's offense sucked. It was abysmal as advertised. It sucked.
75 passing yards.
Yeah, I mean, they did not deserve to win. They absolutely did not deserve to win. I do agree with the godfather of the SEC that Alabama's defense did play well. It did, because I thought outside of giving up the one touchdown, which, like I said, Michigan was in plus territory, Alabama like held them to all those field goals. I mean, granted, I can't stress enough how bad Michigan's offense is. It's terrible. But I mean, the fact that Michigan's defense had all those players opt out, they had some guys that were really good still playing, but no Will Johnson. I mean, some opt outs, and Bama's offense was that bad. I mean, Milroe has not looked right in weeks. And I know he's declaring for the draft, but, I mean, his draft stock is not good right now, in my opinion. If he gets drafted in the top 3 rounds, that's just a travesty. And I like Milroe. I really do. But he has played awful this season. And I'm not blaming it all on him. I still believe that the system that Kalen DeBoer is running with Nick Sheridan, it does not suit a guy like Milroe. It suits more of a guy like Penix. They did great with Penix. I do believe that Ryan Grubb, if he was the OC, though, even though Ryan Grubb was used to quarterbacks like Penix and Jake Haener, I do think that Ryan Grubb would have done a better job with Milroe, but I still don't think it would have been perfect because of the fact that those guys are just not as adept with running quarterbacks. It's a different style. Because, I mean, you saw the one pick Milroe had, because Milroe had the 2 fumbles, but the one interception he had, he just stood in the pocket and just made a stupid throw. He wasn't even pressured on that play. I will say Michigan did pressure Milroe a good bit, and Milroe didn't have a lot of time to throw. That's why the fumbles occurred. But still, man, I mean, the one pick was dumb. Just a bad throw. And if Milroe even scrambles just a little bit over to his left and makes that throw, then it's not a pick. It's just because Milroe was just standing in the pocket. He's just thinking he can hit a layup. It's not how it works. Yeah. Quarterbacking is a lot harder than that. Milroe is just not a pure pocket passer. He can make throws, but he's not a pure pocket passer. They mismanaged Milroe very badly this season. And what they need to do, if they're not going to get a new offensive coordinator, which I still think Bama needs to do that, Nick Sheridan's not the guy in my opinion, I think that Alabama definitely needs to get a quarterback that is more suited to the system that DeBoer is used to. If they do that, I think it's going to be a whole lot better of a fit. And they need to get, more weapons at wide receiver, because Ron Williams is just, it's not enough. He's not, a guy that can just take over a game unless you get the ball in his hands. And I think having another receiver that's really good next to him, it's going to make Ron Williams a lot more dangerous. It's just hard when you didn't really have another weapon, and Milroe is just missing him so much. So that's just my thoughts. It was a dumb game, a terrible game. Bama should have won by 30. And I'm not even saying that because I'm biased. I am biased a bit, but Michigan didn't do anything. They did nothing to win the game. It's just that Alabama gifted them the game. They absolutely just gave it away and still could have won at the end. But blew it. And I agree with Darrell that he doesn't have the accuracy to play in the NFL at a high level. I mean, you have to develop throwing. That's what people were saying with Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen. If Milroe can do that, then he could be good. But he's so raw, man, right now with his passing. I don't think he's anywhere near where even those guys were coming out of college. So we'll see. But yeah, if he had come back to Bama, it wouldn't have done him any good, because they wouldn't have changed, their system of play to make it better for him. So I guess he did the right thing by leaving.
And we have the official announcement from Jaylen Milroe's Instagram where he thanks Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and to his family, his teammates, and his brothers for the blood, sweat, and tears we shared. The bonds we've built will last a lifetime. To Coach Saban, thank you for believing in me and installing the standard of excellence in me. To Coach DeBoer, thank you for challenging me, for helping me grow into the player and leader I am today. To the entire Alabama family, thank you for embracing a kid from Texas and allowing me the honor of wearing the script A. Representing this university has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Football has always been my passion since I was a kid. I dreamed of competing at the highest level. Through every win, every tough loss, any criticism along the way, my love and dedication to this game has never wavered. Each day, my gratitude for the opportunity to play this sport I love grows stronger. With that said, I'm declaring for the 2025 NFL Draft, Roll Tide forever.
And that's a fantastic statement from Jaylen Milroe. Absolutely. I like Milroe. I mean, he was a fun player to watch, had a lot of great moments, just still unfortunate. He'll always go down as the guy that fumbled the game away against Michigan, though. That game, I mean, if he does not fumble, I don't care what Michigan fans say. I don't care. Alabama would have won that game, and Alabama would have won the national championship last year. They were a fumble away. Milroe, when he fumbled the football, it completely changed the game, and they still almost won. It came down to the end. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Michigan the last 2 years has beaten Ohio State, and they've beaten Alabama. And Michigan won it all last year. And don't get me wrong, Michigan's team last year was very good. Very good. I mean, they were really, really good. I'm not going to take that away from them. But people acting like that Michigan team last year was the greatest team of all time. They had the greatest defense of all time. That's overrated. That's not even close.
Yeah, it wasn't like the 2004 USC team or the
No.
1953 through 57 Oklahoma teams.
Yeah, Alabama blew the game. They gave it away. Milroe, I mean, the thing is it's not that like, oh, Michigan hit him hard, right? And then he fumbled. No, Milroe fumbled in the open field. You remember the play. I will never forget the play as long as I live. I was watching the game. Milroe just fumbled the football and just gave it away. And that play right there is what people are going to remember him for. And this season does not help his case. And
it's like Matt Ryan, where everybody only remembers Super Bowl 51 and the Colts Vikings game where the Colts blew a 30+ point lead against the Vikings.
That wasn't even all his fault, though. I don't even blame him on that.
I know, right?
That game, the Colts defense just collapsed, dude. That was abysmal.
And it's like the people that like think about when Matt Ryan, they only think about when they think about, they don't sit there and think about the game-winning drives where he's making against Clemson to clinch the ACC Atlantic Division, or where he's leading Boston College to victory against Virginia Tech on Thursday night, or that 8-second drive where he's leading the Falcons to field goal position against the Bears in his rookie year. They're not thinking about games like that. They're thinking about, oh, well, Super Bowl 51. Even though he wasn't on the defense, well, it's still his fault, And it's like Bill Butner. Same thing with him. He's the scapegoat for the Red Sox blowing Game 6 of the World Series. It's not Bill Butner's fault that everybody else didn't do their job, but that's his own fault. But oh well for him.
That's the way it works, though. That's the way it works. They're always going to put, have the scapegoat on somebody. I mean, but Milroe does deserve the blame for the Michigan game last year. Because, that fumble was just stupid. He fumbled the football in the open field with nobody on him. And he gave the game away. And this season, I don't blame it all on Milroe for why he was a lot worse. Yeah. I do blame the coaching staff a lot as well, but man, he really, really struggled those final 3 games. And like I said, unfortunately, that is going to be what Milroe's legacy is mostly going to be, is the Michigan game last year and his final 3 games in an Alabama uniform against Oklahoma, Auburn, and Michigan, where he turned it over 3 times in each of those games. And that's sad because, he had a good career overall. It's just sad because I like Milroe, but he definitely ended his Bama career in a rough way. I do want to say we do have 2 callers on the line. Definitely know you're about to bring them on, but I want to comment on this comment about Georgia being mid. I kind of said that all season. Yeah. And I know you remember me saying that all season, Jackson. Georgia was overrated as heck. They had all those people like, they're so good. They're so yes, they are talented. But Beck was overrated.
They're so good. I
don't think they beat Notre Dame anyway with Beck. I think Beck was overrated. Yeah. He's not even that good. And the other guy, the backup gunner, he's young. We'll see what he's got eventually. I don't know. But when I looked at Georgia, they kept struggling game after game. You know what I'm saying? Like you had the Kentucky game, you had the Mississippi State game. The Bama first half was pathetic. Game after game, the Ole Miss game. You remember that game? Does anybody remember that game? Yeah, I remember that game. The Ole Miss game, they were rough. They should have lost to Texas, and they should have lost to Georgia Tech. Like I told you, Georgia was masquerading this year. They were a 11-win team that really should have gone 8-5. They should have gone 8-5. They were this close to going 8-5. And I said it again, and I said it again, and I said it again. And everybody said I was a moron. Well, I would agree most cases that when I'm saying Georgia's overrated, because I have said that before in years past that I think Georgia might be a wee bit overrated. This year, though, I laid hard into that because this team was massively overrated, way overrated. But everybody was like, "Oh, they're just so good. They're a top 3 team." Georgia's not a top 3 team. Like I said, masquerading as an 8-5 team. Had talent, but this was a vastly inferior team because Beck's not that good, and they didn't have a dominant running back. They didn't even have as dominant of a defense. Not as good of a team. Just flat out not as good of a team. So I agree with Steve's comment that you could make that argument for a lot of the top half of the SEC, but I think for Georgia especially, they were more overrated than those other teams by far. I even think Texas is overrated. Yeah. But Texas is not overrated like Georgia was because Georgia all year showed what they were.
There we go. And before we get to our first caller, we have a super chat from JT Thompson. And he says, if anyone has a receiver that can catch, please send them to Athens. Thank you.
Appreciate the super chat, JT. And yes, we needed it at Alabama too. We needed it Bama and Georgia. Both teams need some better receiver help. Better quarterbacks because both Bama and Georgia didn't really have that good of seasons. Definitely Georgia had the better season because of the fact they made the playoffs, but again, shouldn't have made the playoffs. Neither team did very well this year at all.
There we go. And we're gonna go 10 minutes each caller because we're gonna start off with Sean Garner, and we're gonna talk with him for a little bit. How you doing today, good buddy?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. You guys probably a little bit better than you guys are right now.
I will say, Sean, the Michigan game was the best thing that could have happened to Ohio State.
Oh, God, you are not wrong about that. I don't know. It's hard to take a loss like that and say that was a blessing because you just don't lose that game. I feel like this rivalry is more intense there's more animosity between the two fan bases than there is any, even the Auburn Alabama rivalry. But I mean, like, but yeah, it was a blessing. I mean, the team we've seen the last 2 games from Ohio State, we did not see the entire season.
No, not once. The Indiana game, maybe, but other than that, I mean, not really. I mean, Ohio State looks like the best team in college football right now. It's very sad.
I mean, but like right now, but like you say, they look like the best team. They look like the best team by miles. I mean, they have been far more impressive than any of the other teams in it so far. That doesn't mean at all that they're going to win this. I want to say that right up front. Like, I'm not taking anything for granted. I was really, really hoping Arizona State could pull that game out because that would set up what on paper seems like, a very likely win for them in the semis. But
Texas is by far the better football team, but man, they just are overrated again because they do not play up to their potential. They just never do. But Ewers is not playing very well. Arizona State played hard, and they should have won that game.
They should have for sure. I mean,
13.
Yeah, and then in a targeting call from out of note that just like I don't know. There might be one official who didn't think that was targeting, and it happened to be the one that was reviewing that play. I mean, it's utterly bananas, and I mean, Texas got off to a rip roaring start right away, and then did nothing for about 50 minutes in that game. And ASU, God, they were. I was looking at the stat lines through the game, and ASU was dominating. They just couldn't finish. For a really long time in that game, and man, just a weird, wacky way to end that game. And I mean, to me, it did not look to me like the better team won that game. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know Texas has a better performance in them than that.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I will say too that the Penn State game with Boise, that game right there should have been a whole lot closer. Boise State gave that away. Missed 2 field goals, 2 fumbles, an interception. You take all that away, and that's a tie game at the end. Boise State outgained Penn State. Boise State played very well. They just couldn't stop screwing up. It was honestly irritating because they're like, oh my gosh, Penn State just they destroyed them. They played so great. No, okay, come on. If anybody watched that game, that was a very close game. Again, Boise State did everything possible to lose. And then Penn State added the stupid garbage touchdown at the end to make it look really bad. But I mean, I'm serious. Boise State had 2 missed field goals. They went for it once on 4th down when they could have kicked another field goal. Didn't get it. Had, again, like I said, 2 fumbles. Because Genty never fumbles, and he fumbled twice, lost it twice. And then Madsen had a stupid pick because he just threw it away when, again, could have went for a field goal. It was just a lot of dumb mistakes. Boise State played very well.
Yeah, and I mean, you could say that a little about Penn State in the first game, too, against SMU. SMU just spotted them a bunch of points.
Yeah, SMU first, though, I will say that.
but SMU, like that, I can imagine a world where SMU beats Penn State. Like I didn't walk away from watching that game thinking like, oh my God, that's just a total mismatch. They threw 2 pick sixes. And they missed a wide open receiver on a 4th and 1 that would have been a touchdown. Like that game, Penn State got. I mean, like they're just the most charmed team in this bracket.
They're getting gifted everything right now, which is hilarious because, like, historically, with especially Franklin, like Penn State just always chokes or on the wrong end of the stick. And these last 2 games, everything's gone their way.
Yeah,
the entire game.
All that stuff, like I know, like a lot of people have criticized Notre Dame for their lack of conference affiliation in football. I think that's quieted down a little bit today with the
The
victory over
SEC did
Georgia.
not do well this season overall. That's
No.
the key. The top of the SEC, just Alabama, Georgia, Texas, is just underperformed. Because I mean, it's like this comment here. The whole Indiana thing, I'm done with it. I'm done with the whole Indiana thing. They should have made the playoffs. They got in the playoffs. They lost in the playoffs. But when you look at all this that Rott says in the chat, and I've been saying it the whole time, Indiana did better than all these teams that they're trying to say are so much better than them on paper against these teams. And I never do that. I never use the transitive property to justify things. But when you have multiple games of evidence, multiple 5, 6, 7 different examples of Indiana doing better than your Georgias and your Alabamas against the exact same teams, I don't really think that does anything but prove that Indiana deserved to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, they deserve to be in. They could have lost that game 75-0. It has no bearing on whether they earn their way into the field. Because believe it or not, they choose the teams for the playoffs based on what they do before the playoffs are played.
Well,
we don't have Minority Report technology yet, to where these committees can see the future and see who would be the better teams. So you have to go based on like what they did during the season. And Indiana very, very clearly had one of the 12 best seasons this year. Again, that is not. I don't know how you can dispute that.
Absolutely. But what irritates me is because people keep saying that they want to put the 12 best teams in. That's not how it works. If they're wanting to put the 12 best teams in, then why is Boise State and Arizona State getting buys? They don't care about that. It's the 12 most deserving teams, and Indiana was by far one of the 12 most deserving teams that should have been in. And honestly, they should have been ranked higher. But the system that they have of the automatic bids pushed Indiana down to number 10. If Indiana, if it had been by the original rankings, Indiana was ranked 7th. In the original rankings, they would have gotten a home game. So I don't want to hear it.
And we could have. Obviously, teams like Alabama and South Carolina were obviously clearly superior to Indiana because they
lost a Big Ten team. That makes
Big Ten team.
I love Alabama, but Alabama did not deserve to be in the college football playoff this year. People are like, Ole Miss did. You know what? Ole Miss is playing a Duke team. It doesn't have their quarterback, and Duke sucks. Duke is the worst 9-3 team in college football. Duke is trash. Duke is garbage. Okay, Duke sucks. I've said all year that Duke sucks, just like Pitt sucked. The ACC sucks.
Yeah, the ACC. They're about to lose their 10th bowl game. About to fall to 2 and 10. Yes, I mean talk a little bit about the Alabama game, Michigan game. I mean, my goodness, Michigan has beaten both of them in each game. Their offense basically was responsible for about 3 points in each of these games.
Well, Steve, if you ever want to fire up Jeffrey, tell him that you're not a fan of Trace Jackson Davis. That'll really get him going.
I'm all good, man. This playoff stuff is so annoying, though. It really is. You know, I mean, I don't understand why people just keep having to compare games and teams. The teams got in who got in, and the teams that were left out did not need to be in. It's just simple as that. They just didn't. Alabama did not deserve to be in the playoffs. They are probably one of the 12 best teams, but did they play like it half the time? No.
They lost like a playoff.
And I know Ohio State did, but Michigan had tons of opt-outs. I mean, Alabama should have won. So
unfortunately, we didn't play like a playoff team on Tuesday.
Craig is saying Indiana got smoked. Have you seen the blowouts in the playoff, man? Indiana was actually more competitive than half the teams in the playoff.
They were more competitive than those diphthons in Knoxville.
I mean, did Tennessee look good?
No offense to Tennessee. It's not against like the players or the content creators. It's the diphthons that were in Columbus.
Well, apparently Oregon probably didn't belong in either because they got absolutely run out.
Oregon shouldn't have been in either. Kick Oregon out. I mean, again, Kirk Herbstreit. Love you, man. Especially in like the 2010s and 2000s. But what's going on with you, man? I don't understand. Kirk Herbstreit, that was one of the worst takes that I've ever seen in my life. and everybody still roasted him for that. You could just say any of these teams did not deserve to be in because they got blown out. He said, "Oh, Indiana got blown out. That proves that they didn't belong in." And I know, I see Darrell saying that Alabama deserved to be in. Again, wrong word. Alabama was probably one of the 12 best teams. So using that logic, yeah, they should have been in, but that's not how it works. They did not deserve to be in the playoffs. They did nothing to deserve to be in the playoffs. That's the problem. That's the wrong word. They did not deserve to be in.
And I argued the point that I didn't think SMU should have been in the playoffs because I thought that I thought the committee did a terrible job in rewarding the wrong things this year. Like they simply just looked at how many losses teams had, not realizing SMU played an absolute dumpster fire of a schedule. I mean, just so bad.
Well, the thing is, if Indiana had lost the Big Ten title game, then they would have been in the exact same boat as SMU, because that's the only reason SMU was even on the fence. If they didn't even play in the ACC title game, then they would have gotten even a better seed. So that game is what almost knocked them out. That's why the conference championship game is a thorn in the side of these teams. It's not even worth playing in these games anymore unless you're having to win to get in, like the Big 12 champion.
And think about Clemson having Georgia and South Carolina on their schedule this year made that ACC championship game a must win. If they go into that ACC championship game with one loss, maybe, and then they lose to SMU, maybe they still get in. So the moral of the story is don't play anybody. Just don't. It doesn't benefit you nearly as much as you're risking.
You would have solved the argument if SMU had missed the playoff. Then you would have heard so many SMU fans and just college football fans crying foul that, oh, well, they played in the conference championship game and lost, and now they got knocked out of the playoff. That's why Nick Saban said, and I agree with him, if you're saying SMU shouldn't have been in the playoffs, then they never should have been ranked 8th to begin with, because being ranked 8th gave them a chance to barely lose and still get in. If they had been ranked 12th going into that game and lost to Clemson, then no one would have cared, because they're not getting in. They never were ranked high enough. Well, they were ranked 8th, and since they were ranked 8th, that's why I told Jackson, all Alabama needed was SMU to win the game against Clemson or get blown out, and Alabama was in the playoffs. They would have been in the playoffs.
It was absolutely so it would have been probably a weird thing if you're an Alabama fan watching that game. When Clemson got up to that big lead, you're probably like, "Oh yeah, let's go Clemson, let's rock and roll." And
SMU would not have gotten in the playoffs, and they tried to tell
and then once SMU started to turn it around, you're like, all right, I guess we're pulling for the ponies now. You just switch your allegiance right mid-game.
Because if SMU wins, Clemson doesn't get in. They were nowhere close to getting the spot. If SMU had lost by 25 points, they would not have gotten in. And they tried to talk to Ward Manuel. They were like, well, when SMU was getting blown out in the first half, did your thoughts on SMU getting in? Did you have like them not being in? And he basically just kind of didn't even answer the question. Of course, SMU wouldn't have gotten in. They would have been out. Alabama would have been in. But because they barely lost, they got in. He just didn't want to answer that, though. He didn't want to answer it.
And then,
Well, Sean, we've got some other callers.
I did want to say one last thing because I wanted to touch on the game tonight really fast, really quickly. All right. I'll tell you this. I said this weekend on the After Dark show that this game was going to come down to just whoever kind of had the big fluky play, made the big mistake, whoever kind of stole points in this game was going to win. And it came down basically to a strip sack at the end of the first half and a kick return for a touchdown. And I mean, like, Georgia they don't have the intangibles, they don't have the maturity, they don't have the focus. I mean, it's amazing to say a team that won the SEC just felt like an underachiever almost the entire season. There were a couple times this year where they really let it loose and showed off what they can be, but it didn't have. It was not tonight, and it wasn't very often during the season. And if people want to say make the excuse for Carson Beck being out, Gunnar Stockton, I think, played about as well as you might expect Carson Beck to play tonight.
Carson Beck did not have a good season. He was terrible.
And Gunnar Stockton was pretty good tonight. He was pretty decent. You know, the offensive line wasn't. The receivers weren't getting any separation for the most part. You know, I mean, how can you assume, seeing what Carson Beck was this year, to assume that he would have made the difference in this game? I mean, that's a preposterous notion.
Well, I still think is preposterous is the fact that Ohio State loses to Michigan, and people are like, "Oh, Ohio State, they're horrible." Ohio State was always a good football team.
Mm-hmm.
They had the talent. That's why they got it in the portal. And they had so many great returning players. We knew they were going to be good. That wasn't the issue. It was whether they got it all together. They lost to Michigan, and ever since then, these last 2 games, they've again looked like the best team in college football. And then you look at Notre Dame. They lose to horrible, garbage, trashy Northern Illinois. All right, lose that game. What's Notre Dame been since that game? They've
Really
looked like
good.
a top 5-7 team. They've been playing great football.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because you have a sucky game does not mean you're bad. You know, that's what's frustrating. I appreciate the compliment on that, Cheryl. I do know a little bit about football, I will say. I don't know as much as experts, but I do know a little bit. Can't say I know nothing, but
no, yeah. So I don't know. I'm really excited that 3 of the 4 teams in this playoff are in places where it snows. So let's so the North is rising again.
The thing about Big Ten fans is so funny because, like, every time they beat the SEC in a game, it's like, guess what? Then they start celebrating. They're like, oh, well, we beat the SEC. We're better. It's like, you know, the Big Ten actually has an argument to be the best conference when you stop celebrating that. If you start getting some titles, you beat the SEC on a regular basis. And, that's when you know the Big Ten is at the SEC's level. If you keep celebrating every time you win a game because it's an event, you're not there. The SEC is still the best league. The Big Ten has catching up to do, but they are, you know, they've closed the gap. It's not what it was 5 years ago. They have closed the gap.
And if you want to know, like, where the power of football still lies, go look at the high school top 50 programs in the country. Go look at the Rivals recruiting rankings and see where all of these players live that are matriculating into the college ranks. There's a whole lot of Floridas and Georgias and South Carolinas and Alabamas on those lists, and decreasingly fewer Ohio's and Pennsylvania's. The SEC is going through a little bit of a transition. I don't think they have quite the right coaches in enough of the programs that have really high potential. But
plus, it's that Big Ten media rights deal. I mean, that media rights deal is a monster. And adding the teams they did, I mean, it's given the Big Ten national footprint everywhere, basically.
And
I mean, except the South, but they're recruiting the South very well. So
yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, Sean, what adventures you got going on Twitter and Blue Sky this weekend on CFB After Dark? I see your beer grew bat. So
I'm sorry, what?
I noticed your beer grew bat. So the
it's wrong. I need to trim it probably tomorrow or so. Okay, I don't know. It probably should be. I'll be sweating the Bengals game against the Steelers really hard on Saturday night. Although I don't think it's looking too great because it looks like Kansas City's going to be resting a lot of guys against the Broncos on Sunday. So, yeah, I'll still be holding out hope if hoping the Bengals can finish the season strong, finish with a winning record, if nothing else.
Joe Burrow's had a great season. I mean, he's played very well, and I felt bad for him all season. So I kind of am pulling for them to get in the wild card because, I mean, they've been very fun to watch. It's just that start of the season, man. They had a horrible record. It's just hard to overcome that. But definitely was never Burrow's fault.
No. And the defense is much improved. They've been playing a lot better lately. So, you know, if they get into the playoffs, that's going to be a bad draw for somebody.
I love that with Steve. Got to get Jeffrey on first take. Hey, I mean, that would be epic. That would be
we'll have to get him on
classic.
on Stephen A. Smith's personal show, the Stephen A. Smith Show. Like that would be a great watch. Like I'd be getting my popcorn, Coca-Cola all set.
All right, guys. Appreciate you
coming on,
having
Sean.
me on.
Good luck to Ohio State.
Oh yeah, go Bucks! Roll Tide!
Roll Tide! And before we get to our next callers, we've got a new YouTube member, a Crimson Faithful member for Alabama with the Boys College Football. Thank you so much, Breakaway 34. The benefits of becoming a YouTube member at Alabama with the Boys College Football, including the Crimson Faithful member, are getting loyalty badges next to your name in the comments and live chat, and you get members shout out. Custom emojis to use in the comments in the live chat. And when you become a Saban disciple, you get priority replies to comments and access to monthly hangouts with guys like us and Johnny Birch. And of course, you can connect on social media with us and give out content requests by becoming a Bear Bryant legend. And we will not let rain nor sleet nor snow put a stop to us. We're not letting bad internet stop us from fulfilling your content request when you become a Bear Bryant legend. And thank you so much, Breakaway 34. And big breaking news, we have officially hit 2,500 subs as we have gone live. As we started the show, we were at 2,497 subs. We are now at 2,500 subs. 500 subs away from the magic number 3,000. That is our next goal right there. We have to get to 3,000, and then we'll get to more on that for sure. And Jeffrey,
appreciate the support, everybody. Absolutely appreciate you coming to Member Breakaway 34, and Austin reached 2,500 subs. Hopefully, we'll get to 3,000. I'm sure, hopefully for next season. But with your guys' support, we'll try to blow that out of the water. Appreciate it a lot.
And Jeffrey, I got to ask you, what is on the Valentine's Day to-do list 6 weeks from now?
Hey, it's never too early to order Mark Rogers' book, Disputed National Champion. The 1990s reset. Can't beat that at all. Absolutely. It doesn't matter what time of year. It's always a good time to read about some college football. And especially if you are a fan of 1990s college football, definitely the book for you.
There we go. And you will learn about what happened in the 90s, how the decade changed the sport, why the championship results should be questioned, how to correctly think through the scenarios to appreciate the accomplishments of teams that were not recognized as champions. This book provides an in-depth analysis of the changes, controversies, and outcomes that defined the decade of college football. It challenges readers to explore and critically evaluate the decisions that shaped the national championship landscape, unlock the mysteries of college football's most debated decade. Grab your copy now. Here we go. And he is a very good friend of the Voice of College Football. But we're going to do a little something different. We're going to bring in 2 at a time in this case. Like we usually don't do, but in this case, you know what? It's special night. We'll do that. Everyone, Dr. Buckeye, and a very special man who has seen the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yes.
Drought, our buddy, Will ND. Don't worry, Darrell. We'll bring you in 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, wake up the echoes there, Will. Wake up the echoes.
Notre Dame's back.
I know your mic or something there, Will.
Here we go. You know what? Yeah, it's special night. Why not? We usually don't do it, but in this case, we'll make an exception.
There you
go, Darrell.
Wow.
MVP.
Darrell.
Okay, I think I fixed it. You did,
Oh,
Will.
there you go. You did.
Okay, yeah. Let's just all bow down for a moment. We're in the presence of greatness and Will and D. Let's just all bow down.
Yes.
Welcome to the age of color TVs. Welcome to the age of movies actually being animated. Welcome to the future, Will. It only took you 30 years, but welcome. It's good to have you back.
Can I say I remember that Cotton Bowl victory over Texas A&M they had that year? And by the way, if you buy Mark Rogers' disputed national championship years from the 90s, he will probably talk about Notre Dame's disputed national title year in 93 with Florida State. That's the kind of information, ladies and gentlemen, you can only get from Mark Rogers at the voice of college football, ladies and gentlemen.
Great plug, Doc.
You're not going to get that on the big networks. It's just not going to happen.
I tried to do my best Jackson there. That was my best Jackson impersonation as he plugs away for Mark all the time.
Brian Young's son. I felt like this is full circle because Brian Young's son, Bryce. I mean, he almost did the roughing the punter, but they didn't call it. But I like how both generations can say they've had the last two Notre Dame big bowl wins. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh man, this is a huge. Who would have thought we would see Notre Dame in the drought today? It was a few months ago. Nobody thought it was going to happen. Nobody was thinking, oh, Notre Dame's going to end a major bowl drought. But they did today.
The thing that still makes me laugh, though, is the fact that at the beginning of the season, when they lost to Northern Illinois, everyone was like, they're done. They're already eliminated from the playoffs. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand that. I told Will the day of that loss, if Notre Dame wins out, they're in the college football playoff. They're not going to miss the playoffs. They easily got in the playoffs, and now they've won 2 games. The other thing I think is funny is the fact that they said that the teams with buys went 0-4. So what I don't understand about that is they're trying to say that now the buys are bad, right? The buys hurt the teams. I don't agree with that. I know that some people say rest. When you have rest, sometimes it can make you rusty versus if you play and you have your gears already oiled, you're ready to go. But I think part of it's because Boise State and Arizona State, we already knew what they were. The most likely that they weren't going to win, even though Arizona State gave a heck of a game. It's tough to beat a team twice in the same season, so Oregon couldn't do that with Ohio State. And Georgia was beat up. Notre Dame was too, but Notre Dame won. Good win. But I don't think it's an indictment on buys to be in where, oh, you're going to lose. I don't think that. I just think it was partially who got the buys, and also because of the fact that the other ones, it was just kind of probable that the other team would win. I mean, I think a lot of people thought Ohio State would beat Oregon the second time. And then when you had, again, Notre Dame got Georgia at a very fortunate time. But still, I don't think that's an
beat Georgia with Beck. I mean, Beck didn't show me anything this year that the guy they had today did.
No, Georgia also had other injuries too. But, I mean, Notre Dame did a really good job. I'm just saying I don't think the buys had anything to do with it.
Can we also maybe pump the brakes? There was this thing, and I'm going to say this on an Alabama channel, about Kirby being the successor to Nick Saban, and that Georgia is the next SEC team to kind of get on a run. I will say this. If you think about it, and I remember Alabama fans were talking about it at the time, Jackson, and I'll say this on an Alabama channel. I actually think Georgia's too, and I know this is tough to kind of kick on their grave today, but and probably way too early. But Georgia benefited the 2 years they wanted from injuries to 2 wide receivers. If you stop to think about it, because if Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt in that title game, and I know Alabama fans were talking about it all the time that offseason, and I know, and Sean would have vouched for this. If Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt in 22, I mean, you tell me, guys. And by the way,
Marvin Harrison one still irritates me. And people know that I'm a critic of Ohio State. I do criticize them a lot. But that game, Ohio State would have won that game if Marvin Harrison doesn't go down. That is a given. I know that some people say you never know what would have happened. Ohio State was controlling the game, and that was targeting. I don't care what they say. That was targeting. They didn't call it. He got knocked out of the game. But I agree that with Jamison Williams, that's a little bit more like maybe Georgia, maybe still could have won that one. I don't know. Yeah, but the Ohio State one was for sure. They would not have won that game.
The Jamison one occurred at the beginning of the game, so we don't have any data for how it would have happened at the beginning of the game, whereas the Ohio State game, we had 3 quarters of data. So I think there's more evidence pointing to Ohio State winning that game. But because of that, we actually got to invalidate Notre Dame's win today because their starting quarterback, didn't play for the entire game. So this win doesn't really count for Notre Dame. If
down for
a quarter to change the outcome of a game. then a starting quarterback should obviously change the outcome of the game. So we should just invalidate it.
Wow, Darrell. Talk about reaching for a straw today, Darrell. I know you're trying to keep the
you and your logic, David. I don't believe in the weatherman. I don't believe in injuries playing a factor. I don't believe in the snow or the wind being too loud. I just believe both teams play the football game on the same field and have to deal with the condition.
Just let Will and Notre Dame fans have their moment, Darrell. Let them have their moment.
I am.
Well,
Will, you got a big speech prepared, I think, right?
Yes, please.
I mean, it's emotional for me because my dad passed away this summer, and he brought the Notre Dame fandom onto me. So, like, I'm happy, but I'm also sad I can't do it with him. But I mean, so many players just stepped up today. Like Junior Tuihalamaka, who was like a backup pretty much most of the year, got some playing time, and then RJ Oben with the big play. I mean, I felt like everyone played like their best. They're up to their potential for Notre Dame, and maybe not so much for Georgia. And I think that was the big, along with the turnovers and the run back for the touchdown. But I also just think that the coaching staff, I mean, the Irish are never going to be able to recruit at the top. They can recruit up there, but not at the top. But the coaching staff that Marcus put together, they've done a phenomenal job since the NIU game. And I think they just showed it. Like they became more prepared and just ready to win.
Yeah, I'm very happy for you, Will. Definitely glad Notre Dame was able to win. I did not want Georgia winning another championship because they'd have gotten even more arrogant. Like, oh, we've taken over college football now. So thank you, Will, for Notre Dame beating Georgia. And I do, like you said, I really wish you could have been able to see it with your dad. I hate that. I really, really do. Yeah. But I do want to mention this comment with Ralph though, Jackson. This hurts as well. Bama was ranked number 1 at some point in the season 08 to 2023. It's never happening again. Thank you, Ralph. A stab to the heart. Thank you. I can't say it'll never happen again, but a 15-year streak like that, no. They'll be ranked number 1 again eventually, I would think, but not like that.
Yeah, we all feel so bad for you guys. Oh my goodness, you were ranked for number 1 for 15 straight years.
Yes,
check out the violin for these people, please.
Yeah, I know it's world's smallest violin, but still it hurts. Man.
Then Mr. Pink from Reservoir Dogs like world's smallest violin. I don't tip.
Jeffrey, there was something I was going to ask you about Sean at the end of the call. He was talking about wild card games. What are those? As a Chiefs fan, we don't understand this concept. Our season only starts championship games. So
don't you remember the wild card games from 2013, 2017?
The game you blew against the Colts, wasn't that in the wild card game? I mean, you guys are past that now.
Yeah, Darrell doesn't recognize the Alex Smith era. I don't think he's moved on from that.
I only recognize quarterbacks that don't make the Pro Bowl, like Patrick Mahomes.
Okay.
I don't think Patrick Mahomes really gives a rat's behind about the Pro Bowl. He's just like,
the Pro Bowl is so lame now.
And disrespected. I mean, nobody believes in us. We're 15-1, and we're just the underdogs. It's beautiful. We're both the powerhouse and the underdogs.
I'm sorry, Darrell, though, but when Travis Kelce was on there saying that, nobody believed in us, nobody thought we could win the Super Bowl, I picked them to win. So many people did like, we're the underdog. I know you have to fuel yourself, like give yourself motivation. I know that. But trust me, people do not believe that the Chiefs have no shot to win. People believe that they have a very good shot to win. And a lot of people, until proven otherwise, are going to pick them as the favorites to win it all again. Even though there are a lot of detractors because of the Lions, but it's not like they're really, truly underdogs here. So, I mean, it's just fuel for Kelce and Mahomes to keep playing well and win again.
By the way, the most overused line by every football team is everybody disrespects us. Nobody believed in us. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that from every football team, I wouldn't be here. I'd be in the Bahamas. I'd be rich and loaded, man. I mean, if I heard any team uses that, it's such a BS line.
If Vanderbilt, when they beat Alabama and they go up there, said nobody believed that we could beat Alabama. That's fair. Okay, right. That's fair. But then when you got the Chiefs as 2-point underdogs to the Eagles, no one believed in us. No one thought we could win. Okay.
Hey, can I ask? I do want to ask Will. I did pick your team to win, by the way, Will. I did pick you guys. I thought it was a field goal game one way or another, but
I thought so too. I picked 2017.
Yeah, I think I said 17-16 on Mark last night, but I didn't have much confidence either way. My question is, I thought I saw you post in the chat that you have some confidence going into this Penn State game.
I mean, I feel like it's going to be a battle, but I feel like we're just built different, and
It seems
our team on a mission. Like, Penn State hasn't impressed me like a lot.
No,
against like lower teams, so I feel like also the bump up in competition will be tough for Penn State, going from Boise and SMU to ND. Well, maybe not.
Can I ask you about this team? What feels different about this team compared to some of the other Kelly teams? I mean, anything personnel wise, or just what you think of the team compared to some of the previous teams, like during the Kelly years?
This team they play with more confidence. They play with an edge. I mean, Kelly's team, which is a bunch of nice. I mean, they weren't like this, but they're like a bunch of nice Catholic guys going to mass, living their good life. And this team definitely recruits more inner city guys, like Love from St. Louis, and a bunch of other guys on the team as well. I feel like they can actually believe they can win. They're not like happy to be here, like I feel like Kelly's teams were. I feel like they're determined, like every game, let's do it. Like their motto now is like 60 minutes of FU football.
I do think
we're going to be here to punch you in the mouth. We're not just happy to be here. And we're
that defense is really good. I was wondering if you were concerned about losing your top defensive lineman.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
but I feel like Al Washington, who was with the Buckeyes, has done a great job like getting these guys ready to play. Like they're all ready and they're all making plays. I mean, maybe they're not as dominant and as big as Cross and Mills, but
we swapped linebacker coaches. You got Laurinaitis there, and then you guys got Washington from us. I do wonder if Carter, though, Abdul Carter, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft, is going to play. I was asking Mark about that earlier, about the matchup, which could be huge one way or another. I will say I do think, Darrell, I know you said that Aller gets streaky. I thought early in that game against Boise, he made some really good throws. His first 2 touchdown passes, I said this to Mark, Darrell, were dimes in that game, I thought. And I've defended Aller the entire season because he's got a bunch of mediocre dudes at wide receiver. I mean, he's got one guy to throw the ball to the entire year. Now, it's a really good guy to throw the ball to, but I think those receivers are pedestrian at best. That's why I've defended Aller. I don't know what your thoughts are. I know you said he was inconsistent, but
yeah, I was particularly highlighting Drew Aller's performance in the game against Boise State because some of those throws, I don't care who you have. You could have Marvin Harris, Jeremiah Smith. They weren't going to catch them. I mean, some of those passes were 5-10 years off, and those throws are on Aller. But there's plenty of drop balls or just bad routes running, stuff like that for wide receivers. They have no separation. Their best wide receivers a tight end, to be honest with you. Yeah. So it's tough for him. I understand it, but that's what separates the good from the great ones. And if you want to be in the Final Four and you want to win national championship, you got to be great. And I don't know if Drew Aller can be that great quarterback. I've seen Will Howard have those in these last 2 games. Obviously, greatness.
I feel like Drew Aller is the modern day Kirk Cousins, where he's going to come up short in the big games.
That's an interesting.
We've dealt with adding on to yours. Like we've dealt with like Scoreton. Like Scoreton didn't dominate the game against us. Maybe Carter can. Maybe Carter's better than Scoreton, but I mean, I feel like our line's just gotten better since that game too. But yeah, he'll be a problem, and he'll make plays for sure.
Yeah, they had 2 good edge guys. Dennis Sutton's a good player, and Carter's a good player. Good to see that Ohio guy Wagner. I thought played tackle for you guys tonight. Substituted in.
Yeah, he battled. Mitch Evans is from Ohio too, right?
Yeah.
Did you look at either of them? Or?
Well, I really wanted Wagner that last class because we could have used tackles. They missed out on 3 tackles that were in-state guys. Blake Miller's playing at Clemson, and Bear, I think one of the offensive linemen, I think is playing at Pitt. And that was Stud and people complain about Justin Fry's recruiting for offensive line. That's why everybody for Ohio State was freaking out when they lost Simmons and Seth McLaughlin about the offensive line. At the end of the year, because they really didn't have any depth, at those positions to back up those guys.
Are you any of you all watching the Ole Miss Duke game?
I knew that game was going to be a blowout.
Okay,
couldn't compete.
I know Duke can't compete, and they lost 52-20. Tells you the type of game. Why Lane Kiffin, with 10 seconds to go, is having the players get to the line of scrimmage and having the quarterback throw a 30-yard bomb down the field to get it inside the 5 when they're up 32 with 5 seconds to go in the game? My goodness. You want to talk about the worst case of stat padding I think I've ever seen in the history of football.
Duke was so bad this year. I'm telling you, by far the worst 9-3 team in college football. Barely beat UConn. Shouldn't have beat North Carolina, but Carolina choked it away because they suck. They had so many bad games. They almost lost Northwestern. Duke was terrible. They were horrible. And I'm not surprised Ole Miss blew them out. But I don't really think a lot of people like Lane Kiffin for what he says
My dad
online.
hated him at SC.
And his
He was
actions.
so
I mean,
happy when he
I
got
don't loathe the
fired.
guy, but I will say that his comments on social media kind of irritate me. It's like, dude, you lost to Kentucky, man. You lost to Florida, Kentucky at home. You didn't deserve to be in. Come on.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my god.
Well, he said during the fourth quarter when they had the interview, he said, we're going to send a message. So he intentionally basically said, we're going to run up the score on Duke to show the playoff committee we belong. That's basically.
I mean, he's gonna tweet right after the game. Oh, this is why we deserve to be in. This is why we deserve to be in. It's like, okay.
Honestly, Jeffrey, if I was seeding the bracket, I would have had Ole Miss. And I think Alabama should have been in the playoffs because you just look at the committee's rankings; they would have been in the playoffs, except for the stupid format what we got.
The format's dumb. The format's absolutely stupid. And I agree, Alabama would have been. I just said they didn't deserve it for their poor play. But I mean, they were one of the 12 best teams on paper. But they're not seeding it that way. They're not putting the bracket together that way. And whether they should or not, I would say they probably should, because it is dumb to have teams that aren't, really that good in the playoffs. But that's just the way that they're doing it. And still, I think 12 teams is just too big. I mean, we've discussed this a million times. But I mean, Ole Miss, they set their coffin when they lost to Kentucky. They just could not do that. And then the Florida game, you just can't do that.
Yeah. Can I say this? I had Ole Miss in the playoff at the beginning of the year because I thought their schedule lined up pretty good.
It did,
but they had two let's just be real. Those are bad losses. They just are. You know what I mean?
You don't deserve to make the playoff if you lose to bad teams twice.
I mean,
Bama did the same thing. Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. That's the problem. Bama and Ole Miss should have only lost 1 or 2 games this year at most, and they didn't. They lost 3. And 2 of them to bad teams. Ole Miss is a little bit more forgivable with Florida because Florida got better. Florida got better at the end of the year.
Lagway.
Because, I mean, if Ole Miss plays Florida at the beginning of the season, they're going to win the game. I don't care how bad Ole Miss played. Florida, see, the thing is Kentucky was better at the beginning of the season, and Darrell would agree. They almost beat Georgia. They beat Ole Miss, and then they tanked after that. Whereas you look at Florida sucked at the beginning of the year. They sucked. They were absolutely terrible. Season went along, Lagway starting, and they got better. Because, again, I've said this before. I've talked about Georgia being overrated all year. The other game I always forget to mention is that Florida game. Lagway goes down. Florida falls apart. Florida was winning that game when DJ Lagway got hurt. Florida got so much better at the end of the year. You talk about South Carolina being hot down the stretch. Florida was hot down the stretch. Lagway all season, Florida might be a playoff team. I'm actually serious. Florida was very good down the stretch of the season.
You know what's crazy? Everybody at the beginning of the season had Billy Napier getting fired and having a horrible year, by the way. It was like a countdown to Billy.
And I said the only way he wouldn't get fired is if Lagway came in and played well, and that was the case because Graham Mertz wasn't going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say this year, people bemoaning the 12-team playoff. As an Ohio State fan, I should be celebrating the 12-team playoff this year.
Yeah, you're the.
Because there's a legit shot Ohio State wins the whole thing, and they wouldn't even have got in with a 4-team.
I think, honestly, I think we just need to sit for a few years. And if we see the situation as like the same thing as it is today, then we need to take a look at. But I don't think we need to just give up the system that we're in right now that we wanted a few years back. I don't think we should be changing up every little thing once a year. I think we need to just take a look at it in 3-4 years from now, because I don't think it's going to be like if next year we see like same thing, then I think we'll see conversations.
What do you mean by same thing? Do you mean the Big 12 and G5 teams getting blown out? Do you mean the bye teams going 4?
It's going to happen, though, for the most part. I mean, Arizona State did very well, but I think that was more of an indictment against Texas than anything else. I mean, Texas, people said, oh, Indiana played nobody. In their only game against a legit team, they got blown out. Well, you want to know what? That's what happened to Texas. Texas didn't do anything all season. No. They did nothing. Their schedule sucked, and they lost to Georgia twice. Was Georgia really that good? So that's what I'm saying. Texas isn't all that impressive. I'm serious. Ohio State, if they play like they played the last two games, Ohio State's winning the whole thing. They have to keep playing the way that they've played the last 2 games, though. But if they do, they're winning it all because Texas hasn't really shown much. I mean, they've been so overrated all season long. Arizona State is a fine team, but Texas should have beat them by 21.
They should have. Well, I mean, the thing about it is with college football this year is, that's what gave me confidence as an Ohio State fan. I said this on the call that I had with Mark. Of course, it was a call that was kind of calling for Ryan Day's job, but I digress. I said that, at least with the playoff this year, I didn't think there was a dominant team. Because Day's first year, I actually think our 19 team was one of the 3 or 4 best Ohio State teams I've ever seen, but it was caught in the wrong year of college football because of how good that LSU team. They had to play the defending national champions Clemson that year, and would have had to beat Joe Burrow's LSU team, even with a team I felt that was loaded. See, there would have been a year where you would have had 4 really great teams make the playoffs. Do you think
that was better than the 98 team?
No, I would put that 2. I think here's how I feel. Will, I said this on a call actually. I think 15 is the most talented team I've ever seen at Ohio State, and was a waste of talent by Urban because they returned everybody.
Notre Dame team, not as talented as Ohio State.
Yeah.
Defense completely wasted by a horrible staff. That team should have been in the playoff.
You had a good offense. That was probably, what did you say, the best offense of the
Look who's in the NFL on that defense, though. That defense has and it was wasted by a horrible coaching.
Yeah, it was a good Kelly team. That was a decent Kelly team, but 15, because we had everybody back, I always thought was one of the most talented rosters we've ever had, but then we lost that bad game to Sparty in the rain. By the way, what's crazy about that year, 15, I have to bring this up with an Alabama call. We would have made the playoff if 2 things would have happened. Number one, if Scum would have fielded the punt against Sparty, we would have made the playoff. Because that would have been Sparty's second loss that year. And you know what helped Alabama that year? The crazy Arkansas Ole Miss game, which remember, Arkansas, how many times they flip it around, Jackson? It was like 800. Did that game go to like 855 overtimes that year or something like that?
No, are you talking about the 2015 Arkansas Ole Miss game?
Yes.
That was actually 1 overtime.
Okay, I thought
you're talking about like 2003 Arkansas Ole Miss, where that went more than 3 overtimes. It was like
when I think of multiple overtimes, I think about that LSU Texas A&M game a few years ago. That was like the last game before they changed the rules when it was the 2-point conversion. I like the old overtime better.
Like for me, like when I'm thinking of multiple overtime games, there's Georgia Tech from this year, Penn State, Illinois 2021, Texas A&M, LSU 2018, and any Arkansas game from 2001 to 2003.
Penn State, Illinois as well.
Yeah, Penn State, Illinois a couple years ago, yeah. But to be fair to Jackson, you guys do not make the playoff that year, and that flip around play never happens.
Agreed.
Because Alabama wouldn't have made the playoffs the last couple of years if it wasn't for Bond in the left corner of the end zone last year.
Yeah.
And Corey Brooks 3 years ago in the right corner of the end zone against Auburn. So, I mean, Alabama's been getting kind of lucky, too, on some of these, but their luck ran out this year, finally.
Yeah.
No Saban anymore, though. Saban, it was just everything good happened when you had Saban, right?
Yep.
Well, that's my question is, how much is the SEC's run really a Saban run? And I put that out to Darrell. How much of it is a Saban run? Because 6 of these titles are his. He's the greatest coach in the history of the sport for a reason. And his team was always there. How much of the SEC's run is really a Saban run as opposed to it just being the best conference, though?
Is it thinking about this? Because I thought you would bring this up. I think a portion of this is Saban, and something nobody's talked about, and you're going to hate David in particular, is Michigan and their resurgence. I think those two things in tandem has really narrowed the gap significantly because you're raising one program back to where they should be at Michigan, and you're lowering Alabama to their floor, which they have been without Bear Bryant and Nick Saban previously. So,
and 1 year by Gene
Alabama's
Stallings.
ceiling is ridiculous, but their
floor, but
their
you don't
floor
have,
is, I mean, not awful, but it's not good either. And I mean,
No,
if Alabama's going to be mid for the next few years, that's definitely going to hurt the SEC.
I hope this doesn't happen. But if USC gets their act together, they have the highest ceiling of anyone, man.
And USC
maybe of everyone, but they got a long way to go.
Yes,
man.
Very low floor.
Well, Will, we put out that question last week. Who's in worse shape, Oklahoma going forward or USC going forward?
Oklahoma, because their recruiting grounds all going to get raided by the other teams.
To USC. So I mean, Oklahoma doesn't have as much money.
I mean, Lincoln Riley is a gloated offensive coordinator. I mean, he cannot. I mean, people.
He's not a leader. The biggest thing with him.
I mean, is he better than Cliff Kingsbury? I mean, I guess.
The biggest thing with
I remember
is that he just does not seem like a leader of men.
Yeah.
No, well,
I don't think he's a program builder.
I remember Jason Watkins from Hall of Fame College Football and Tim Prangley got in a humongous debate in July of 2023 over Lincoln Riley and Brent Venables. Like it was a wild one for sure. But
I agree with James Monroe that Michigan's got money. Yes, Michigan's got money. They throw so much to Underwood. Yeah, they got money.
Sure.
What'd you say, Darrell?
I was going to say both Oklahoma and USC are now both in the toilet. I mean, you rarely see a complete lose-lose in college football, but that was a lose-lose.
Like they were like fighting each other and they were fighting each other like cats and dogs, but now they're just like, well, buddy, here's a swift kick in the rear. Here, I'll give you one.
I think what's funny about it is that like about 5 years ago, when you're talking about like the potential of Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, Oklahoma was the team that was in better shape. People were like, oh, Texas is going to suck in the SEC. They're not going to do anything. Oklahoma will be all right. Well, then that flipped immediately right when the announcement was made because Texas got a lot better right after that, and Oklahoma's just gone down ever since then. Because Oklahoma, I mean, right now in the SEC, I mean, if they're in the ACC, they're still like probably a 9-win team. But again, that's a low bar. Duke's a 9-win team. Oklahoma's bad. Like the only reason they beat Alabama is because Alabama just had some trash games, absolute trash games. You saw what Oklahoma was against LSU.
They're not going to be good next year, even with Mateer. I mean, he's not going to have a great roster to work with, really.
No.
I feel like they have to do a lot more.
It's such a downfall from Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. I mean, they're not even close to those guys. None of them.
Well, that's it. I think that number one, Lincoln got some generational quarterback talent. I think he benefited from being in the Big 12. We're giving up a lot of points because remember those defenses were all-time bad defenses, even with that quarterback play. So the guy's never built a defense. Number one, and then he got Caleb Williams to come in that first year at USC. And he was able to have a great year out of him where he wins the Heisman. And, takes advantage of the pack that year. And then the next year, if you noticed last year, when there wasn't as much talent around Caleb Williams and Williams regressed last year, and maybe you're starting to see that a little bit in the NFL this year, that team wasn't very good. And he still can't find a defensive coordinator. I'll say this about Day as an offensive-minded coach. He made one bad hire in Kerry Combs as our defensive coordinator in 20 and 21, and we paid for it. But he's made up for it by hiring Jim Knowles, who's doing a really good job with the defense right now.
Mm-hmm. See,
the biggest Combs just seemed like a guy that everyone liked, that like everyone wanted to see him get promoted, but it just didn't work.
See, this comment right here is a big problem, though, for the SEC, though, moving forward. Big Ten is deeper pockets in the SEC. Why is that? Because when you look at the fact that now with NIL and donors and all this being a part of the sport right now, the Big Ten has so many rich alumni because the Big Ten is an academics conference. The SEC has a lot of conferences that do not rank well in academics. You got Vanderbilt, and that's about it. Alabama doesn't rank well at all. Look at Northwestern. Look at
Florida's also a strong school.
Yeah, I know,
No.
but I'm just saying the Big Ten has
you're right.
way better academic universities, way better academic universities.
Jeffrey,
And there's so many
ahead.
rich alumni that are donating these programs. That's what's helped the Big Ten. If NIL ever gets regulated again, that's going to help out the SEC. That's why you've seen SEC coaches complaining about this, because they realize they're in trouble. They realize that the pendulum's shifting, because money is going to help the Big Ten ultimately in the end if this continues, because these donors, I mean, when you're seeing stuff like this, of like Moose saying we have Larry Ellison, look him up, fourth richest man in the world, this kind of stuff is not going to help the SEC, because the SEC doesn't have these people in their corner at the same rates that the Big Ten does. I mean, Indiana's been asking Cuban for every Cuban, come on, Cuban, help us, Cuban, come on, Cuban. And Cuban's only worth $5 billion, but still, that's a lot of money. And just giving a couple million here and there, that helps with facilities, that helps you get players. So, yeah, it's just the SEC, if they don't get what they want, where NIL gets more regulated and these donors don't stop with all this donating, then the Big Ten is going to probably surpass the SEC in the future.
Jeffrey, that won't happen because you're forgetting one thing.
One thing, let's hear it.
Willpower. The SEC just cares more than the Big Ten.
Oh, wow.
Not the top schools, not the Ohio
You don't think money matters more? These players
Jeffrey,
want money. If they're
Jeffrey.
getting paid, look at Ohio State taking Caleb down
Ohio
in the
State's
center
elite.
from
Jeffrey,
Bama.
Jeffrey.
Money.
Hold on, Jeffrey. Before you blew up, I was about to clarify. Not the elite schools like Ohio State and Michigan. I'm talking about your Minnesotas. I'm talking about your Illinois. I'm talking about your Michigan States. I'm talking about those level of schools. They fundamentally do not care as much as the SEC's mid-tier teams. Ole Miss, the reason they're so good is because they care. That's the only reason they're this good.
Can I mention a couple things? Number one, where's all the J.R. Ewings? Maybe I should say like Landman people now, because that's the new show, and I'm dating myself by saying J.R. Ewings. But where's the Texas oil money? Where's all that right now?
There's always somebody.
Because what did Saban say a couple years about good old Jimbo? That Jimbo basically bought a recruiting class a couple years ago. Now that also may be proof that money doesn't always buy you happiness, by the way. Mm-hmm. So that sword cuts both ways. So it's
always better. It's always better to cry in a BMW than a.
So I'd be leery about the money tree, because go ask Texas A&M how that worked out, because you can be stupid with money. We've seen that in Major League Baseball for like 800 years. Go talk to the New York Mets, who still have Bobby Bonilla Day going on.
Yeah,
I mean,
I always see those videos from urinating tree.
So to say that money always buys you happiness, you could buy some crappy football players too. You know what I mean? And you could have some moronic football coaches who can't develop them as well. So
like Kurt Signetti bringing in
I would be a little bit
3 stars, and it all hit this year. It hit, but that doesn't mean that next year it's going to work. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to bring in the right players. I agree. It's not all about stars, because you can bring in a 5-star who's never going to develop because he just doesn't put in the work, will never care, doesn't matter, and he'll never be any good. But then you bring in a 4-star guy that tries harder and is going to do well. I agree with that. I just think all across the board, the SEC is in trouble if the current rules don't change.
Well, that's the other point I was going to make. I don't think they can let the inmates run the asylum for forever here, Jeffrey. I mean, I don't think they can. I mean, I know everybody thinks, and I was leery about this when it first happened, because I knew there's a lot of good intentions in this world that nobody has a plan for. You ever notice that?
Dr. Buckeye, do you think it's kind of like the Gunsmoke episode, The Constable, where all the townspeople are like, well, Matt, we don't like the way you're running these Texas trail hands. We're going to hire a man from out in the country, but then they hire the man that's like the constable, and he's like this meek little man, and then Chester's like, oh, they're going to run him over, Mr. Dillon. What happens? They run him over big time, get him plastered all over the place. Then they're like, okay, we learned our lesson. When's that moment that you think you're going to see where the donors and the people that run college football are like, okay, we learned our lesson.
Once their money gets wasted, Jackson. Once they see their money gets wasted. Once they see moronic coaching, once they see, well, these recruits ended up being, we got this transfer quarterback and he threw 25 interceptions this year.
Well, that's why coaches are getting fired faster than ever, too, because it's like, well, we're going to get rid of you and get someone that's actually going to be worth our investment.
Yeah.
I mean, before NIL, Indiana would have never fired Tom Allen.
No, and Allen had a good year in the COVID year, by the way, because he had Penix. The Penix
but
team.
if you didn't have NIL in the portal, though, there's no way Tom Allen's going down. He would not have gotten fired. But Indiana was like, well, you know what? We're gonna get left behind here. We're gonna get kicked out of the Big Ten if we keep up this losing brand of football. So they brought in Curt Cignetti, have a great year, and now Indiana, is one of the talks of the land. Whether that continues or not, we'll see. But you have to win, and I think that if the Big Ten teams do start catching up with all the money that they're getting through donors and the media rights deal, then you might start seeing those mid teams start to care more. You might start seeing the Minnesotas and Illinois and stuff like that care more than they currently do. Because, I mean, the thing is, look at Auburn. I mean, how much longer can Auburn fans care? Auburn fans care, but they suck, and they know it. They know they suck. If they suck for 5, 6, 7 more years, are they going to continue to care?
Yes, Jeffrey, yes.
We'll see if they do. We'll see if they do.
The program was invented, and they still care.
Auburn's bad, though. Like, they're really bad. They have nothing to cheer about.
South Carolina is probably the most underachieving program in the history of any sport ever, and they still pack their stadium. It's just, I hate to say it because it is cliche and it's a bit egotistical, but it does just mean more.
Well, I actually think Texas, if you think about it, is one of the more big, and I know we're going to play them, and so maybe don't mean to pile it on, but just for where they're at, they should be great.
They are.
Well, I mean, Sark is returning them to power. But other than that Mac Brown run derail from 04 to 09, they were irrelevant for a long time.
Oh, yeah. They had botched coaching searches, botched coaching searches after one another. But this comment on the screen is hilarious to me because you're at best beside us right now. You haven't even passed us and you're bragging. Listen, you were 2 laps down in the race and you caught up to us. Congratulations. Now you actually got to get ahead of us.
We'll see if this is the 2006 of the Big Ten. We'll see.
Can I just say, I was always told like how pathetic it was for a Kentucky fan or a Vanderbilt fan or a South Carolina fan to grab to the coattails of Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. How about grabbing to the coattails of a team that's not even in your conference in Notre Dame? How pathetic is that? You can grab the coattails of somebody that's in your conference.
Well, can I just say this too? I feel, it's interesting. Jackson, did you watch the 30 for 30 on the Auburn-Alabama rivalry?
Yes.
Okay. Was it well done?
They need to update it.
Okay. But it was well done at the time, I thought. And, even at that time, and that was at a time we were dominating the rivalry, I still felt our rivalry is the best in college football and in sports. But at that particular time, it was interesting. I heard, I think Mark Ingram said at the time in that documentary, he actually did root for Oregon to beat Auburn in that Cam Newton title game. Mm-hmm. He rooted for Oregon to beat Auburn. But then I've heard other Alabama fans say they've rooted for Auburn to beat other teams in bowl games. How does that cut with Alabama fans? I don't, Will they root for Auburn to beat other teams, or would they root for? I want to hear this on an Alabama.
When I was younger, like a little boy, I didn't like the idea of having to pull for Auburn, Tennessee to have a better record so we could beat them. Like, I didn't like that. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. Because I want it to look like the 1971 Iron Bowl where both teams were unbeaten.
I don't think the hate's as bad.
Well, I mean, nothing beats Michigan Ohio State hate. It's gotten absolutely out of control.
USC,
it is unreal.
Now, USC, they when UCLA and Notre Dame lose and then USC wins, they call that a perfect day. I don't think they've had a perfect day in quite a while, but I'll have to.
USC, 22, they did.
That's right.
Well, how do you guys feel about this comment by Keep Shopping? Says NIL is really stressing the SEC, some of the poor states in the country. That's true. Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, those are very poor states.
I wouldn't be surprised
and then you look at the Big Ten. I mean, you've got a lot of cities and states that have money. I mean, you got Texas now with the SEC, but that's about it in Florida. But then in the Big Ten, you've got California, you've got Washington, you've got Illinois. You've got, I guess, New York with Rutgers or whatever they claim. That's stupid, but
I would not be surprised.
It's a lot more money. It's a lot more bucks. It's not going to drive everything. I agree with DeReal. The thing that's going to probably help the SEC the most is that the talent is in the South, and the fans care, but money talks so hard. And if the Big Ten schools are going to be able to pay more than the SEC schools for players, and a lot of those guys are not going to be going to SEC schools, they're going to go to Big Ten schools. That is why you do not see the Florida teams dominating like they did in the 90s and 80s and 2000s. You don't see that anymore because of the fact that the Florida teams do not keep their best players predominantly.
No.
They lose them to Bama, they lose them to Georgia, they lose them to Ohio State, they lose them to other schools. That's why they suck. Miami, Florida State, Florida were all good in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Not anymore on a regular basis because they don't keep their talent as much. That's the problem. The players care about this. They do not care about location. If they did, then all the in-state guys would go to the in-state schools like they
There's
used to.
some guys that do.
Like that
Yeah.
some, but it's such a small amount compared to what it used to be.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And honestly, I would not. Here's what I'm wondering, because you know, like how like all these schools are having like some big donor pay for their NIL expenses. I'm wondering if we're going to see like SEC schools try to get Elon Musk to be the highest bidder, just be like, oh, well, you may not be a college football man, but we'll make it worth your while, Elon.
I heard some Ohio State fans saying that J.D. Vance should get into good graces of Elon Musk so that he can.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
start to contribute or something. No, I'm kidding, but hey, you know, this is how it's done. So I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, people rip us on this $20 million payroll, but hey, the people threw down the gauntlet. They said this is the way things are going to be. So here you go. I mean. You know, I mean, the other thing too, you know, kind of what you guys are saying, the sport is less regionalized than it ever has been. You know what I mean? Where players now, you know, stay in one area or don't stay in another area or what have you. You know, I know with us, we've even before NIL, we were nationalizing our recruiting base. You know, Urban kind of started.
Not under Cooper, right?
Well, no, Urban really started. I looked at the numbers, Will, a long time ago. I've talked to this on a lot of Ohio State chats. Tress was 60-40 Ohio, and Meyer was 40-60 the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I've always said that the team that Meyer won had like 14 or 15 starters from the state of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not about location. It's about having the best players. That's the key. And like you said in the past, Dr. Buckeye, Ohio used to have more really great players in state, and that's not the case anymore. They still have some, but it's just not as many.
Well, it's not as many as, let's say, in the 90s or early 2000s. I will say that I looked at the in-state the next 2 years. It's pretty good. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, the theory is that always been, and you can kind of see this with Midwestern programs. What's the theory? You get your big boys from the Midwest, and you get your speed from the South.
Oh yeah, I mean, Florida has tons of speed. I mean, even a guy that's a 2-star can be a speed demon. I mean, he just might be a little undersized or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, there's just so many fast guys. I agree. Go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, before we get our next part, we have a $9.99 super chat from the Godfather of the SEC saying that this is a great show tonight. We thank you so much for the super chat, Godfather. We appreciate it very
Godfather.
much.
Yeah, James Monroe said, don't dog on the SEC state. Hey, I'm not. I mean, I live in the South. So does Jackson. I'm not dogging on the South. I'm just saying that they're poor. They are poor states. That is a fact. That is a fundamental fact.
Well, we're not poor,
I mean, like you got the big Mercedes dealership in Birmingham, Alabama, or whatever with Nick Saban. But trust me, there's not a lot of Mercedes-Benz drivers in Alabama. They're ordering that stuff and shipping it across the country. Okay, I'm just saying. I've been through Alabama. There's not a lot of Benzes in there.
Well,
no, it's
we're not.
It's not slight. I'm just saying.
We're not poor. We're broke.
Help me on that one, Jackson.
I don't mind it. I don't have
That's
to be
the
putting
Dave
on the
Chappelle
Ritz.
route.
Putting on the Ritz, you know.
There we go. Go the Dave
the dollar
Chappelle route.
gets you a lot further in the state of Alabama than the state of California.
Oh yeah, $1 in California is not worth anything. That's why they want $30 an hour now.
Well, people are jettisoning though, so you know who knows. Maybe that's a reason people are getting, you know, that people getting out of California. I don't know, but
I mean, they just go to us poor southern states.
I think they're moving more out west into like the Colorados and the other parts of the West, from what I've heard out there. But I don't know.
Moose says college football is NFL light now. I mean, it basically is. It's a shame. I don't like it.
Well,
but there's nothing we can do about it.
See, that's what I say about the sport, though. I love the sport. I do. But, and I've gone back and forth, because a lot of hardcore college football. And I said this to Mark, do I like college football more now? And Ohio State could be on the precipice of winning a national title. So obviously I would love it now. But no, but I mean, a lot of people are saying that. I'm not the only one. Even non-Ohio State fans are saying that. But I said, did I like college football more now, or did I like it more, let's say 10 years ago or 20 years ago or something like that? And I think we're one of those programs that's been fortunate to be relevant for a long period of time. So there's a lot of areas where I've liked it. So I don't know. I think I might have preferred it more 10, 15 years ago, because I think it is becoming the NFL light. And what is the thing that everybody's always said about these pure college football fans? They've always says, well, I love it because they play for the purity of the sport. You know what I mean? And they're out there. No, but people used to use that line, didn't they, Jeffrey?
Yeah, they did.
They were lying through their teeth when they said that. That's where people say something and mean the other, by the way, in our society. It was they say, oh, I love college because they play for the purity of the game. And then it's like, well, no, go ahead and pay us. So it's like, you say one thing, you mean another in this world, which is, the ultimate thing. So I don't know.
Right. I don't know how I would feel if Ohio State won the national title, because I'd be like, yay, they obviously were the best team. But there's a part of me that's like, man, that Michigan loss should have knocked Ohio State out of the playoffs. And that part of me just bugs me, because it's like, the NFL,
that's what they wanted.
Right, but you could lose to your rival, and nobody bats an eye in the NFL if you win the Super Bowl. And in college football, we're going down that same direction.
See, that's why I said that last year was the last time that a game like that Ohio State-Michigan game was so important. It was so big. It was hyped up the whole season, and the loser of that game was out of the playoff, which Ohio State won. And if Michigan had lost, I mean, that game was the ultimate game. And now, and this is what I talked about this with Mark, and Mark kept, he was justifying on the other end that, well, it makes more games more important. Yeah, it does. It makes games like Ole Miss, Florida matter, because if Ole Miss doesn't win, they don't get in. Yeah, it does. But it takes away the significance and the importance of a game like Michigan, Ohio State last year, because this year it meant nothing. Because Ohio State didn't win, and they still got in, and they could still win a national title.
From the Ohio State perspective, you want to beat your rival at all costs.
Yes.
But winning a national title is forever, man.
Yeah.
Like, do you think your average college football fan knows Michigan beat Ohio State this year, or who's going to win the national title more?
Well, I'll say a few things.
Well, everyone knows the Ohio State-Michigan game because of the fight. I mean, a lot of people know, more of my friends know that than
right.
No,
David speak, and I want to. Yeah,
that's okay. I just to that point, Darrell. I was on, interesting enough, the team up north chat before the start of the season.
God bless you.
Yeah, I know. I deal with the people in denial and the delusional fan base all the time. But in any case, we were talking about it at the beginning of the year, and one of them was talking about what Jeffrey just talked about, the loss of importance for the game. And I must say a few things. First of all, if you heard the Ohio State fan base and either other people outside of the Ohio State fan base, the quote unquote lunatic fringe, to quote Kirk Herbstreit, by the way, great name for an 80s metal band is Lunatic Fringe, by the way. That could be coined as t-shirts as well. But in any case, if you listen to any of it, what did they say? First Take, a lot of those people were calling for jobs. There were people that were not part of Ohio State, the fan base, that were calling for his job. I even called it in question on Mark's show the next day. And, listen, they're not going to stop giving Ohio State players gold pans, so it matters. They're not going to take down the clock inside the Woody Hayes facility that shows the countdown to the game every year. It means something to people. It's still, I think, the most highest rated college football game every year. It is. it means something to a lot of people still. Those things are still facts.
It's not that it doesn't mean a lot to people and the players. It's just that the importance of the game is less.
Well,
because it doesn't have the stakes that it had before. That's what I'm talking about. It's not that the game doesn't matter to people. It's the fact that game last year was do or die.
Well, remember,
and losing you're out. Whereas this year it didn't mean the same because Ohio State, it wasn't a do or die game. They lose, it didn't affect them in any way.
Well, Jeffrey,
Michigan probably beating Ohio State helped Ohio State more in the bracket. It probably helped them all over the place.
Jeffrey, remember we almost won a national title 2 years ago in a 14 playoff era after we lost to them, though.
Mm-hmm.
If the kick goes in Georgia, we would have beaten TCU. We would have won the title that year. So, it almost didn't mean anything that year, too.
Right. That Michigan team was so much better than this Michigan team.
This Michigan team was by far the worst of the 4 teams that beat Ohio State.
But there's the thing, Darrell. That's what makes it bad, is how bad they were. Not only as good as we were, but as bad as they were, because there was no excuse this year.
Right.
And the game was at home.
Something else I was going to bring up, and this struck me during the Arizona State-Texas game, is if somehow one of these Cinderella teams wins, I believe we've converted into college basketball where the national championship is secondary to the average person. So let's say Arizona State beat Texas, I believe more people would remember this college football season for that upset than who won the national championship. Similar to in basketball, nobody remembers who won it the year Kentucky lost to St. Peter's. People just remember the St. Peter's upset.
Yeah, and the Loyola Chicago run, and the Fairleigh Dickinson win, and the UMBC win. I agree with that. That's true. But I think that's also because you're adding more games, though. So there's more games for people to watch, and people are gonna remember something unusual, something that's not supposed to happen. Texas beating Arizona State does nothing for people. It's like, okay, they won the game. It was how they won the game. But to your point, if Arizona State had have won, it would have been remembered longer. People are like, oh yeah, remember the year Arizona State won? That was crazy. Yeah, I agree with that. But when you had a 14 playoff, it didn't happen because of the fact that those type teams would have never gotten in. You had only Cincinnati being undefeated in the TCU year. But other than that, basically every team that got in was a legitimately really good program at the very least. But now that you're having a 12-team playoff, it's giving more of a chance for upsets to occur. Still less of a chance because football is just fundamentally a different sport than basketball. But I do see your point, though. An upset happens. People are going to remember that a whole lot more than just the usuals winning. I agree.
Well, and I want to point out these next two super chats we got. One from JT Thompson, and he says, please buy Dr. Buckeye a new pair of Radio Shack headphones.
I miss Radio Shack.
Cover shipping.
Okay.
People will be like, how did you ever go Radio Shack? I had a Radio Shack around the corner when I was a kid. Come on. It was a cool place. But
there was one, but
that's a relic of the 2000s, man. Come on.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll be sure. Radio Shack. Who had Radio Shack on their bingo card, I guess,
I vaguely remember going inside Blockbuster.
Yes.
Okay, that's a throwback. There's a throwback. Was in Bend, Oregon. The last one of those was in Bend, Oregon for a long time, man. But that's a throwback.
Was somebody going to make a MySpace reference here soon?
Okay, that was before my time. But my I've had older family members that have used that, cousins and stuff. So I know about it. It still exists, dude. You can actually have an account and stuff with MySpace.
We looked up our teachers' MySpace accounts.
AZ King says, you telling me you would have been okay with Penn State and Indiana in the playoff and Ohio State out? We beat them both.
The problem with that statement, though, is that if it was a 14 playoff, none of those teams would have been in. Okay, so it's like that doesn't even. Why does that even matter? I mean, someone said Darrell was nuts for saying Ohio State shouldn't have been in. He's talking about in a 14 playoff.
Yeah.
A 14 playoff, they would not have been in with a loss to a garbage Michigan team. Alabama wouldn't even have been sniffing it. People would have been, man, Alabama had a crappy year. The only reason people even say like Alabama was still decent was because they were one spot from the playoff, because you've lowered the standard. The standard's been lessened to get in. I mean, those teams that made it when it was just a 14 playoff are always going to have that leverage. Like, well, Indiana, yeah, you made it, but you only got in a 12-team playoff. It's not as big of a deal. It is true. I mean, yeah, none of those teams would have got in. So that statement doesn't matter. Do appreciate the super chat though. But I mean, Ohio State got in the playoffs because of the fact that it's a 12-team playoff alone. And that's the only reason Indiana got in. Otherwise, Indiana would have just gotten a really good bowl game.
You guys do think we're going north here with this, but we're going to only get more teams here, right, guys? I mean,
I don't want more teams.
It should have
been more teams.
It's not going to contract. It's not going to contract. You know, do you really think it's going to? Do you think they're just say, "Oh, we realize the error of our ways. Let's go back to 4"? I don't see that happening, guys.
Yeah, we're not in a Hollywood movie.
See, the issue is this comment right here. Like he says, 12's better than 4. We get to see teams that are actually like Arizona State who would never have been considered before. The problem with that statement, though, is that all of the other games sucked, though. Right? Like, and that's to Darrell's point. That's the point that he's been hammering home the whole time. The other games sucked. Indiana basically got murdered. SMU got murdered. Yeah, Boise State, even though the game was a lot closer, they whatever. But they pretty much got beat soundly. These games are not that close. That one game was close, and that's good. I enjoyed that game. But the fundamental fact is that in most years, 4 to 6 teams legitimately are the best teams that can win it all. There's like 4 to 6, maybe sometimes 3 to 5, depends on the year. And that's where it should be for a national championship. College basketball is a different sport. The only reason they're expanding this is money. It's all about money, so they're going to keep expanding it, but it's going to get even dumber because instead of people complaining about Indiana being 11-1 getting in, there's going to be people complaining about, like a G5 team with 2 losses or a 4-loss SEC team. It's just stupid.
See, I said 8.
It's just money.
Yeah, 8 would have been perfect.
8 would have been good. Well, the nerds had I don't always like the nerds, the college football nerds. I listen to their show from time to time. They said 6, which I thought would have been interesting. But
yeah,
but they'd have had a bye. Still, you still had to deal with the byes.
Something, Jeffrey, you didn't mention as well for Arizona State is if you're a Big 12 or ACC team, your non-conference game literally doesn't matter at all. Literally is irrelevant because you're basically going to be in a one-league big for most years. So Arizona State, the fact they struggled against the worst team in SEC football in their worst year in 20 years doesn't matter. The fact they almost lost to Texas State by they only beat them by 3 doesn't matter. And those type of games are the games I love as a college football fan.
I do think they'll matter for if teams get in or not.
No, not for the Big 12. Big 12's a one.
Not for the. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
ACC's
the Big 12 is the one conference that doesn't have one program in it that is a top 10 to 15 program in college football. They don't have any. Even the ACC does have a couple. That you do not have a top 15 program in the Big 12. So in most years, that game is the winner's in. That's it, and they're going to get that auto bid. And we were lucky enough that Arizona State was as good as they were and played as good as they did against Texas because most years the Big 12 is going to suck in that game. Most years.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, gentlemen,
I just want to mention briefly, I was very happy Florida State opted out this season of bowl games. I was very
Florida State opted out of the whole
they didn't even play. They didn't opt out when they played.
There you go, Jeffrey.
They didn't opt out when they played Cal.
Yeah, Cal and Justin Wilcox, man, went 6-6 and still lost to the worst Power 5 team.
Hey, that's the question next
Purdue,
year.
I guess I don't know, Purdue or Florida State.
That's the question, Jeffrey, for Indiana do you go the Norvell? Does Signelli Norvell next year?
Please, no.
Is he Norvell next year? Is Siggs Norvell?
No, I think a TCU.
I hope not.
TCU, David, 2022, where they go.
That's more likely, but I still think Indiana's going to make a bowl game. Still think they're going to make a bowl game next year. But
Google
I mean, the Florida State drop off was unreal. The thing that helps IU, though, I don't know if you've been. This is not a prison shirt. I don't know.
It looks like one, though.
But the thing is with Indiana, I don't know if you see some of the returns. Mikel Kamara's coming back. Aiden Fisher's coming back. Elijah Surratt's coming back. So they got a lot of the all Big Ten players from this year coming back. And they got Mendoza in the portal. I don't know what you feel about Fernando Mendoza, but I think he's solid enough. Kind of fits what Rourke was.
Hemby, the running back.
And they're really looking in the portal. So I can see a 7-8 win team. I mean, I think they'll be all right. If they end up like Florida State though, man, then something's going on. I don't know.
They won't.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well.
Good night, gentlemen. It was a good conversation.
Doc, you're going to win the Natty.
Well, I hope so.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Dr. Buckeye.
Happy New Year, gentlemen. Congrats, Will.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Congrats.
See you.
Thanks,
guys. And Darrell, what have you got going on your adventures this week?
I'm sure I'll be made fun of in every chat I'm going talking about how the SEC should just quit football. They should just quit all sports in general. We shouldn't even play
basketball.
Oh yeah. 16 for 16. Will, how does that seem? How about every 1 and 2 seed be from the SEC? Wouldn't you love that? That's a legitimate possibility this year.
It could happen.
I don't think Notre Dame now.
Well, they're not going to be any from the Big Ten because the Big Ten doesn't really have an elite team in basketball this year.
Yeah, what happened to Indiana?
Indiana, yeah, it's Woodson, man. It's Woody. Until he's gone, Indiana's not going to be that good. It's just the way that it works. If they had Kelvin Sampson, they'd be good. But they had to fire him over allegations of junk. You see what he's been doing at Houston the last 10 years. If he was at IU this whole time, Indiana would have been fine. Even Tom Crean, they probably still be better than right now. I mean, Woodson can get some decent players, but man, his style of play sucks. I mean, Indiana's 11-3. They just beat Rutgers, but Dylan Harper didn't play either. But Renew was out for IU. I think Indiana might be bubble team again, but it's still pathetic. But Purdue's worse. I mean, Oregon's looking all right because now they're in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten doesn't have a great team. The Big 12, I don't know. Kansas just lost to West Virginia, but
Iowa State is good.
That's true. So.
Jeff,
yeah, but Michigan's getting better. Dusty May should be in Indiana right now. Okay, like Will said, Jackson Davis is the only reason Woodson.
I do love some of those old Mike Brady teams, man. I do.
Oh my gosh, man! The early 2010s games and teams, and man, the Sweet 16s. Those were so fun. Those were fun.
There we go.
Jeffrey, I knew your coach was going to get fired or should be fired when I was watching some in-season tournament when they were playing Louisville, and they were 14th in the country and down like 35 to Louisville, a team that won 8 games last year.
I mean, they're a lot better this year, Louisville, but Woodson's just not a good coach. I mean, that's the problem. His style of play. I mean, he's still like, my style of play when I was cooking it up with who was that coach? Will the NBA coach Larry what's his name? Larry Brown. When he's like, I was cooking it up with Larry Brown back in the NBA back in the 90s and the 2000s. It was a great offense and all. It's like, dude, that's 25 years ago, man. Like, come on. Like you cannot be running an offense that's dated back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just outdated. It's terrible. He recruits the wrong players together. He gets talent, but then it just doesn't fit. It doesn't even fit together positionally. He just isn't very good. That's just the way that it is. And the only reason he's employed is because he's a former IU player, and they went that route under Bob Knight. They went that route like with Penny Hardaway and Juwan Howard and Patrick Ewing. It's just, I don't think he's as bad as Patrick Ewing or whatever, but still.
Well, Juwan Howard was pretty bad as well. He was the Scott Frost of college basketball. Anytime I saw him up 10 in the second half with 10 minutes to go, I know Michigan's going to lose this game. I mean, they just found a way to lose games that just like, good gosh. Maybe they should have called a timeout. I think
that's funny. The Scott Frost of college basketball.
Yeah, Larry Brown was a great coach, but I mean, Woodson, man, he's always like daydreaming about his days in the NBA, man. And it's like, dude, it's outdated, man. Modernize the offense, but he doesn't know how, and he won't get like a coordinator, he won't get a coordinator to like assistant coach rather. I'm thinking football term, assistant coach to like just put an offense together. Like even bring Tom Crean back. Just have him do some offense, like anything, because Woodson doesn't know how to do it. Yeah, I don't think I said Bob Knight.
I heard someone.
I did not say that, did I? Will, I said Woodson played for Bob Knight at IU. Bob Knight, I know, didn't play for IU.
I heard someone,
and then he coached at Army before Indiana, and Krzyzewski played for him at Army. So yeah, you are right about that, Sean. Go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah, I heard that. Bob Knight was a complete and total jerk where like he had to be referred to as the general when he was coaching at Army because like he liked that title name, whereas like John Wooden had an actual Army title. Like I forgot what it was, but somebody mentioned that in a comment section the other day where I was watching from a Bob Knight video or something like that. But I remember reading about that. I was like, "Yeesh, what a turd!"
Well, I mean, Bob Knight had a lot of stories that people don't like, but the one story that I always love about Bob Knight, though, was the one player that Indiana had. I don't remember his name. It was in the 80s. He got in a car accident, was paralyzed from the waist down. He would have been a draft pick, and he asked the NBA to draft him in the final pick of the draft because back then they had like 8 rounds, there's 7, 8 rounds or whatever. It wasn't 2 rounds. I don't remember the player. I don't know if you remember the story, Will, but there was a guy that the NBA drafted with the final pick of the draft from Indiana.
He cared about the players in his own way, but as a person,
I'm not saying that he was a good person at all, but he had his moments, is what I'm saying. Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like people trash him and say that he's just was like Satan basically. And it's like, there's a lot worse people than Bob Knight in this world. Okay. Sure. That's all I have to say. I mean, Bob Knight had problems, a lot of problems, but he was not just this evil person, like all around. He had his moments of goodness. So that's my thing. Bob Knight to me is like the epitome of the human experience. So you deal with different people your whole life. You deal with good people, you deal with bad people, and you deal with people in the middle. Yeah. And I think that Bob Knight was more in the middle. Yeah, maybe he had more bad than good, but there was a lot of good there at times. And I do feel it's a little bit unwarranted, the amount of hate that he gets, especially considering the amount of trashy people in this world that get praised, for something that they did. And it's like, well, if you're going to praise those people for like the one good deed that they did, but then they have like 100 billion things that they did wrong, but you're still going to praise them that one good thing. It's like Bob Knight had a lot more than one good thing. It was just a very mixed bag, a lot of bad and a lot of good. And that's the way most people are. It's just, I feel like Bob Knight gets a lot of hate because of the fact that, like, if he was a coach in the 40s, no one would care. He coached long enough to the point where it entered the modern era where you started having internet, you started having message boards, and then the incident at the end of his tenure with that student that was a jerk. That student was a jerk, but Bob Knight shouldn't have done that either. Retaliating. But the thing is that if Bob Knight stopped coaching in 1985 and no one would have even said anything about it. There were a lot of coaches that were like that. I mean, Woody Hayes. You think Woody Hayes would fly today? Woody Hayes wouldn't fly today. No. He gets praised. Woody Hayes, he was an awesome man. If Woody Hayes is an awesome man, then so's Bob Knight.
He's such an awesome man. They was punching cameramen
into the modern era just enough, and I feel like that's why he gets all the hate.
Like Woody Hayes.
Well, Woody punched a player and got fired for that.
In the 1978 Gator Bowl, Charles Bowman, and next day, you're gone, Woody. I remember
praise Woody Hayes though. That's the thing. Like people praise Woody
Hayes.
I
know, right?
Knight is trash. It's like, what's the difference?
I didn't know that like beloved heroes beat the hell out of beat writers.
That's what I don't understand though. Again, I've never said once in my life that Bob Knight was a fantastic human being, but every time
Woody was known for having a really good relationship with the students at Ohio State. That's what like really made him beloved.
Yeah,
I feel like Bob Knight did as well with his players. I mean, Isaiah Thomas always talked highly about Bob Knight because Isaiah Thomas wasn't even going to go to Indiana. He's from Chicago. He's probably going to go to DePaul or something like that. His mom told him to go to IU because of the fact that, unfortunately, he didn't have his dad. There was no dad in the picture, and he lived in a really bad neighborhood. And right after he got picked up at Indiana, got admitted to the university, his best friend next door got shot. And he thought his mom was going to die, and he was scared for his life, and he wasn't doing very well mentally. And Isaiah Thomas, unless he's lying, Isaiah Thomas said that Bob Knight got him off the brink. So Isaiah Thomas would have never been an NBA player. He would have never graduated. He would have never made anything of himself if it wasn't for his mom saying play for that man. So I just really can't hate Bob Knight completely. I just can't. He might be a jerk. He might be a bad person, but he's not as bad as you think. He's a flawed man that had a lot of
Cheney went after Calipari. Yeah.
I remember.
So, I mean, I that's just my thoughts on Bob Knight. That's my thoughts.
At that time when Ohio State, when Woody punched Bowman in the 78 Gator Bowl, the Buckeyes were having a sloppy year by their standards. And also, it was the third straight season where they lost to the Michigan Wolverines. So I think maybe if like Ohio State
had one more like really strong year, like right after he left, and then they kind of went into
the gutter.
Top 15, but not elite territory for a bit, and then they got bad, and then they got good again.
Big East basketball was very good. It was very, very good.
We need to bring.
You had Ewing with Georgetown. All that kind of stuff. I mean, Syracuse was good back then.
St. John's, that was a golden era of St. John's.
The coach just passed away, Luke
Carnesecca.
I've always struggled.
Yeah,
he was a good coach. A lot of good coaches.
Yep.
It was a good league. Now, I mean, the Big East is just a shell of what it was. It's not
what's funny though?
Seton Hall made a Final Four. UConn was on the rise.
Yeah, not for nothing, but Notre Dame was up 27-3 on Indiana and 23 on Georgia. Weird dialing. That's the post you're talking about, right, Joe Long? Maybe I missed some other post. My bad. But
yeah, Jeffrey, the Indiana player was in the accident. It was Landon Turner, if you're wondering. Okay, yeah, Landon Turner. Appreciate you.
Digger Phelps also raised money for him. I remember.
Landon Turner's the one that got paralyzed, and the NBA drafted him because Bob Knight asked him to. That would never happen today, though, because you that basically the 8th round of the NBA draft was a throwaway pick, whereas now it's 2 rounds. So like every pick matters, unless you're Bronny, and you could just throw away a pick. But other than that, you can't do that.
They could have added an extra pick for a year, maybe.
Man, that was so dumb, man. Bronny did nothing to deserve to get drafted. There were guys that averaged 25 points per game that didn't get drafted, and yet Bronny got drafted averaging 4. Yeah,
You're telling me he didn't deserve to start game 1 for the Lakers this season, Jeffrey?
Go ahead. The Lakers just lose by more than they already would, so that's okay.
Well, ain't no flop like a LeBron flop, am I right? Oh man. Well, DeReal, anything else you got going on this week?
Oh, no, I got some basketball season's about to start, so I got to watch Kentucky run through the gauntlet. That's the SEC. We played number 6 Florida undefeated. So that's going to be a heck of a game at 11 a.m.
You saw the Florida thing too, right? Like the allegation thing that happened, Will and DeReal, and then that just kind of like faded. No one's talking about it anymore. What happened? What happened with that?
Well, you catch me up to speed. I don't know what you're talking about.
Todd Golden was like
Todd Golden was
it
was alleged that Todd Golden was taking pits of his land down under on Instagram DMs,
and that's gone. Like that, it was a whole story for like 3 days, and like no one's talking about it anymore. I love how that happens. I love when
you win, you get away with stuff, man.
That's what I'm saying. It's like really like if Florida was 5-11 right now, dude be gone. Oh, Todd Golden, he's fired, and he did all these things, and we're not giving him any money, but it's like, well, they're undefeated, playing great, whatever, and it's like he's good. Like, okay, I mean, did it happen? Like, if it didn't happen, then cool, but did it happen? So I don't know, man. Like the fact that you don't know about it, DeReal, shows you how it's been swept under the rug. I mean, the whole allegation thing to begin with. I remember it clearly.
That's crazy.
That's what we'll make sure to do.
I bet you $1 million if Florida has a losing record right now, Todd Golden be fired.
Winning cures all, Jeffrey. Winning cures all.
that show. Yeah. We're flawed people. We're flawed. We are flawed. Flawed society.
And I think Jeffrey Bronny didn't start. I think he came off the bench. So I don't know.
Yeah, he came in. But I'm just saying, when you said that, though, I was saying that I wish he had started because of the fact then the Lakers would lose by even more than they already do.
Yep. Well, DeReal, we will catch you later. Thank you for calling in. We'll likely see you again next
Happy
week.
New Year, Drill.
Happy New
No
Year,
problem.
Drill.
Happy New Year's, guys, and high tide.
High tide.
High tide. I'm in that commercial.
And before we get to you, Will, we got this comment from Rough Rider Returns. Enjoy the remaining football games as the off season is brutally long. Well, no problem. We will keep it entertaining as we have more recruiting news, transfer portal news. We'll be going over our takes on that. And we will be going over historic games from the past and top-notch interviews we've got planned out on Crimson Tide Live. No worries. You're gonna be tuning in for some wild rides on Alabama with the Voice of College Football. That I can promise you. Someone was asking a little while ago. Ralph Wolf was asking about. Good grief, 3 minutes ago.
Oh, the Notre Dame basketball.
Yeah, he was asking about Caleb Russell being hurt. Like, wow, this is huge right there.
Yeah, he might miss part of the spring.
Yeah. Let me see. Here we go. Here's the. Yeah, he's currently sitting on the sideline with ice on his right ankle.
Yeah, he got hurt in the Under Armour All-American game, which everyone forgot about because it got swept under because of the playoff game today.
Yeah, well, we're not forgetting it here on Alabama with the Voice of College Football. That I can promise you. We don't do that horse dung. So, and we'll definitely talk more about it on Monday on
Hopefully it'll be all right. He got hurt.
Yeah, and Johnny and I will definitely talk about it on Monday for sure. Thank you so much, Godfather. You sleep well, stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out. And thank you so much, Joe Long. You're welcome.
Definitely appreciate the new member at Alabama, the Voice of College Football with Breakaway 34. Appreciate it. And all the super chats from JT Thompson and also Godfather of the SEC and AZ King. Appreciate it a lot. It was a fired up show. Had a great stacked lineup on the call. Definitely appreciate you coming on, Will, and appreciate the Real and Dr. Buckeye and all of them coming on as well. It was a lot of fun.
There we go. And you can check out Will on Will ND Irish on YouTube and on Marcus_Air on @/Twitter and on Instagram and Threads at Klowski414. And Will, I think we got a certain show going on tomorrow.
Yeah, I got something going on, right?
Yeah, I think we're going over our take on the new year for college basketball.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
There we go. Well, we thank you so much for calling in. And one more thing, congratulations on the fantastic finish against the Bulldogs. Like, I love the kickoff return for the third quarter. That told me turning point's going to be made.
Definitely happy Notre Dame was able to get the win. That was awesome to see.
We're happy for you, man.
Thanks, guys.
There we go. There we go. And it's unfortunate that Keelan Russell got hurt during the All-American game at third quarter, but like I said, it will definitely be talked about real soon, like on Monday, which Johnny and I will talk about it as one of our topics. We'll be going over the end of the season and so much more. But Jeffrey, what magic have you got going on Indiana at the Voice of College Football and on Only Talk Sports?
Well, definitely on Only Talk Sports. Me and Will definitely will try to get back to doing the college football show probably next week with the holidays and everything. You know, Christmas, New Year's has been kind of tough, but we'll try to see if we can get back to that. It's been a lot of fun this season, and me and Will, usually do it every Tuesday night, but we've had to move it to Monday some other days. So we'll see how that goes, but try to get that back on Only Talk Sports. Like you said, Jackson, I talk sports every single day, or at least I try to. Appreciate if you guys go check that out. And also Indiana, the Voice of College Football content on that channel. We'll see how that shakes out this year. Definitely a lot of stuff going on, so we'll try to make that happen as well. We'll see what happens with that. Talk about Indiana during the off season and the great season that they just had. So see what happens there. But definitely every Thursday night, Alabama Crimson Tide Collins show. You can definitely find me here as well, in addition to Indiana, the Voice of College Football, and my personal YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports. Me and Jackson definitely been enjoying doing the Collins show and getting to talk to Bama fans and non-Bama fans. every single Thursday night, and definitely excited for the future of the show. It's been a lot of fun. And you guys make it great, so appreciate it.
We thank you so much. We talk about Alabama football on Thursday nights and on Monday afternoons, or at least we try to. It's not trademarked yet.
I'm working on
it. And for more updates on Alabama, the voice of college football, you can check me out on what I've got to say on Jackson BOCFB on X and on Instagram and Threads on Jackson Johnson 543908, and of course on Jackson Johnson 979. I co-host the Buzzer Beater with Will ND and the College Football Pits Analysis Show and the Final Whistle with Austin from Sports Talk with Austin, and most importantly, also host the Jacksonian, where I have all kinds of guests from sports world and non-sports world, all kinds of people. I'm getting some guests lined up for that show. That I can promise you, and you'll love them. I can personally guarantee it. With that being said, we wish y'all a good night. Sleep well, stay safe, stay warm. Thank you so much for getting us over past the 2,500 subscriber mark. Now let's get the 3,000 subs, and we'll get there. We'll need all the help we can get. And click on the notification bell, like, comment, subscribe. Click on that notification bell so you never miss no video whatsoever. And we will see you soon. Stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out. And have a happy 2025.
Happy New Year and roll Tide.